All right, so chapter 3. Chapter 3 goes on to selecting and defining target behaviors. And so this one aligns with the BCBA task list, section F, behavior assessment, and H, selecting and implementing interventions. So socially significant behavior is like the first thing that it starts talking about in on page 48. So who can tell me what socially significant means and why we seek to improve these behaviors?
I would say it's behavior that's meaningful to the client's life. I mean, you don't want to just teach them anything, sure. I think you said earlier when we started this meeting that you could probably teach a kid to just run back and forth, but how is that going to help him or her in their lives? So I think socially significant just basically mean we're teaching behaviors that's going to help them live a better quality life.
Yeah, perfect. So in my book, I know you guys have seen my book, how I tabbed it all crazy. I also like drew a lot in it. I'm an artist in my heart. And so I drew like a little sun, a ray of sun, and I put meaningful behavior change, improve daily living. So it has to be meaningful. It has to be something that is socially significant and relevant to the child's life. And we can like go off on a tangent and talk about like all of the things that parents might ask you, or goals that they think that are really important to them. But at the end of the day, you're the clinician and you're the one providing this service. So you decide whether that behavior is socially significant or relevant to that client's life. And that's pretty powerful, I would say. But yes, somebody put in the chat that it is one of the 7 dimensions of ABA. And Jen says that she has a great clinical example for a socially significant behavior. Go ahead, Jen.
All right. So I work in, I supervise RBTs and BHTs, we call them before they're RBTs. So today I went to one of my schools and I have a client who her nose runs and she picks the snot and she eats it. Okay. So my RBT said to me, or my BHT said to me, Jen, like, this is really gross. Like, what can I do to stop the behavior? And my thought process to her was, I said, the behavior that's not a behavior that I'm really going to work to change, because yes, it's disgusting, but she has other stuff going on that is way more interfering with her life. She's not hurting anybody by eating this snot. It's not hurting anybody else, and it's not affecting anybody else. So my thought process is like, we're going to work on her elopement from the classroom where she's missing learning environment, rather than working on her eating her boogers. So yeah, that just happened today. And it's a good example, because is eating her boogers like really gross? Yeah, of course it is. But it's not dangerous and it's not affecting anybody else. I mean, you can correct it if you want to, but it's not something that I'm going to target in her behavior plan. So
yes.
Yeah.
I love that example. That's so great. And I have like similar situations in the field where it's like, you have to decide, like, is this really that important? And it's like, I even will lay in bed thinking about these things, which is terrible, that I'm like, I can't turn it off. I'm like, should I really target that? Like, does that really affect her? And one of the ones that I'm always struggling with is the stereotypies, right? So like a lot of people, they want to block their self-stimulatory behaviors, and that might be something that they're working on. But to me, in like today's ABA, where we're trying to be more cognizant of like assent and consent, it's like, why am I going to block something that's reinforcing to them, you know? So like, it's like you have to decide like what is appropriate and what isn't, but then it's also like a gray area. It's like, who gave me the power to decide what is appropriate and what isn't? So one day I had this moment where I was like, oh, I figured it out. I'm only going to track okay, so I'll give you guys an example. So let's say parents really want to target the hand flapping. They really are bothered by that. And this is something that they really want to reduce because they don't like the way that it looks. But to me, like Jen said, there's so many other things that I need to work on that are like way more important, like her being safe and not running away onto oncoming traffic, or her not hitting herself, or her biting, I don't know, whatever. There's so many other behaviors that it's like that one, you know, like pick and choose your battles. She likes to do it. Maybe I should leave her alone, or you know what I mean? But I had this light bulb moment where I was like, I'm only going to track self-stimulatory behavior when it occurs in the instructional setting. So when we're sitting down at DTT, or when she's in circle time, and that will be where I put emphasis on my intervention. So I'll block the behavior heavily in instructional settings, because that's when it's really not appropriate. We need to be listening with a calm body and all of that stuff. And whenever we're not in instruction and she's on reinforcement time and it's recess, then maybe she can go off and do that if she wants to, if that's what she chooses as her reinforcement. But just teaching like when and where behavior is appropriate, that's like something that, an idea that came to my mind, and it has really helped me like as a clinician ethically to be like, okay, I can intervene on this. And then you start to see the behavior drop, and it drops in the settings where you don't want it to occur. And so it makes you feel really good, like, oh, okay, now I'm making an impactful change on her. Now she's able to sit and attend in a classroom. And then when it's recess, she gets to go off and do whatever she wants. But yeah, I can go off forever, and I'm sure Jen can also go off forever and give examples, which is the cool part about this meeting, I feel like, because we're able to relate it back to real life. So stuff like that, where it's like talking about socially significant, and some people are over here memorizing, okay, what are the 7 dimensions of ABA and what do they mean? But can you take it that one step further and apply it? And that's the most important part of the exam. So yeah, socially significant, is it relevant? Should we really work on it? Is it impactful with all the rest of the stuff going on in their life at that moment? And so it says, applied behavior analysts improve socially significant behavior that have immediate and long-lasting effects for the person and for those who interact with that person. Such behaviors include language, social, motor, and academic skills. Okay, so the role of the assessment in applied behavior analysis. Assessment has long been considered the first and 4 phases in a systematic model of instruction that includes assessment planning, implementation, and evaluation. A comprehensive behavioral assessment informs planning, provides guidance for implementation, and assists with evaluation. So behavioral assessments, you guys probably took a whole course on assessments and hopefully have all of this background in assessments. But I think that it's really important to be fluent in all of the different assessments and know your options, like as a BCBA, like had an interview actually. And they asked me, what does your assessment process look like? So they're looking to see, like, can you handle yourself? Can you gather all of this stuff together yourself without any guidance? Because sometimes you do just kind of get shoved and thrown in there, and they're like, okay, conduct your assessment. Tell me, give me my money, basically. And so you're just like, wow. So who can tell me what would be what a behavioral assessment is? What does it look like?
There's different types. There's rating scales, direct observation, indirect observation, interviews with parents, interviews with the child, including teachers, staff, or clinical settings and stuff like that.
Yeah, perfect, Adriana. I love that. So something I highlighted in the book on page 49 is to figure out what the client's problem behavior is and how to change it for the better. So that's summing it up. That's what an assessment is. That's what that initial assessment is for, to figure out what the behavior is. So these kids, they went to a psychologist or a neurologist, and they got this diagnosis like, hey, my child has autism. And then they come to you. What do I do now? And then that's where you take on the rest of the responsibility of figuring out, okay, what are the problem behaviors and how am I going to change them? So that's where the behavioral assessment comes from. And the behavioral assessment discovers the what? The blank of the behavior.
The function.
Yes, perfect. Who said that? Adriana?
Yeah.
I should give prizes. Yes, the function of the behavior and its purpose on that person's life. So who can tell me, this is a fun, you're a BCBA, you need to know this, the 4 functions of behavior.
Seat, sensory, escape, automatic, tangible, sorry.
Attention, tangible.
Oh no, sensory, escape, automatic, and tangible.
Sensory and automatic are the same thing.
Which one am I missing?
Attention.
Sensory. Oh yeah, escape, attention. I'm sorry.
No, you're
tangible.
yeah, perfect. No, you're good, girl. We all just worked a full day and we're still here grinding, so I get it. But that's a good way to remember it. SEAT, SEAT. Those are the 4 functions of behavior. So whenever I'm training, I'm so corny and I'm like, come, take a seat. Let me teach you the 4 functions of behavior. And like nobody laughs at my joke. But yeah, that's a good way to remember it. Sensory, which is automatic, right? So something feels good to me and nobody else can compete with it. So that's something internal, some type of sensory function. Escape is I'm trying to get out of something that is unpleasant. Attention is I want somebody's attention, so I post a new picture on Instagram and so I could get lots of likes. Attention. Tangible, because I want access to something. Yeah, so Adriana said sensory, escape, attention, tangible. Or medical. Oh, she added.
Yeah, I learned that in one of my trainings, like when I first started a couple years ago as just a para, and the BCBA had taught us seat me and then to do medical, because it draws it back into that you always want to make sure there's nothing medically wrong first.
I love that. That is so cute. I never thought to include that into the functions of behavior, but that's cool. That's like one of those like today ABA things where it's like, are we making sure that all all options or all boxes have been checked. So I really like that.
Thanks.
Behavioral assessment serves to discover the function of the behavior. And we talked about the 4 functions. And then the phases of a behavioral assessment. So here on page 49, it talks about the 5 different phases of a behavioral assessment. So I'll just walk you guys through it, I guess, using like the way that I would do it. So first phase is screening. So somebody is screening them, and then you have define and quantifying problems and establishing outcome criteria. Okay, so screening, that'll be like we're conducting the initial maybe direct observation, and we might be interviewing parents, right? So we're first doing our screening, we're finding out their date of birth, what's their diagnosis, we're reviewing records that maybe we got from their clinician, from other clinicians. So that's the screening process. Defining and quantifying problems and establishing outcome criteria. So defining and quantifying, we will be doing our direct observation. So whenever I conduct a direct observation, I've already created a little template for myself. So like client engaged, I made it like really easy. So like client engaged / did not engage. That way when I'm writing it, I can be circling. So client engaged in manding to peers this amount of time, or client engaged in eye contact when name was called. I don't know, whatever the case may be. So you're taking all of this observations and you're just writing them down. You're just being observable and measurable in step B. So we're defining and quantifying and establishing outcome criteria. C is pinpointing the target behaviors. So once I've got all this information, I've talked to mom, I know what's important for her, I know what I see, what I directly observe. And so then I'm starting to figure out, okay, I think these are going to be the behaviors of concern. So we are possibly going to be looking out for these. We're going to be looking out for elopement, aggression, and SIB, let's just say. So we got that part. Monitoring progress. Monitoring progress. So once they're in the, or who can tell me an example for monitoring progress?
Is it collecting baseline data? Is that what you mean by monitoring progress?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm kind of like, stuck on that one, but we can say, yeah, we're collecting some baseline data, and then following up. So it says, although the 5 phases form a general chronological sequence, overlap often occurs. And then it references us to evaluating and analyzing behavior change. Okay, and then this chapter is concerned with primarily with the pre-intervention functions of assessment. Okay, so we haven't even got into intervention yet. We're just, like you said, baseline and doing all of the initial stuff. And so then it goes on to selecting and defining a target behavior, the specific behavior selected for change. Okay. All right, so I think it's safe to move on to talking about indirect indirect, and all of that. So it was just telling us the steps of what we should take in an initial assessment. And then page 50 goes on to talk about assessment methods used by behavior analysts. So the first one is indirect assessment. So it's really important that you know the difference between indirect and direct. So who can tell me what an indirect assessment looks like?
Indirect would be like interviews and checklists.
Yeah, indirect, so not directly face to face. Like that's what I would think, like not directly in front of them. I might have sent it via an email or, you know, something like that. Indirect assessment where I'm doing an interview, checklist. The client is not there in front of my face. Include open and close-ended questions. Interviewing the client. So who can tell me what it would look like to interview the client, and who can be a client?
I've never interviewed a client because I work with kids. Like I guess when you interview their parents, maybe that's who I usually interview. And then I interview teacher. That's usually like, and then usually like by the time we get their insurance, I can get a BHT and then I'll actually ask the BHT too, what they're seeing. So I kind of get like a scope of who's involved. And like some of my kids are nonverbal, so can't really ask them. I've never done like an interview with like an adult. I don't know how you would even interview like a child. So
Yeah,
just
I definitely I agree with you in that I've never had the opportunity to have a client who can answer a question if I ask them. So another thing that's really important in the exam is knowing who is your client. And it's anybody who is directly related to that client. So like she said, the teacher, that's my client now because they are related to this person. And I have to interview them on what behaviors they observe in their setting. The parents, her para, all of those people. Olga says anyone you get consent from. So yeah, all of those people. So it would be interviewing the client and asking those questions to kind of get that information from them. Interviewing significant others. They cannot. Oh, this one, interviewing client, they were literally talking about interviewing the client. So we might not come to that, but we do interview significant others. But it is important that you guys do know that in the exam and in other places, they're going to talk about parents as clients as well, and anybody who's directly related to them. Okay, so then it goes on to talk about the different checklists and rating scales. A behavior checklist provides a description of specific behaviors and the conditions in which each behavior occurs. So who can tell me a very basic and ABA behavior checklist that we use all the time?
the FAST.
Yep.
I also use the MAS, MAS.
MAS. Oh, see, you guys, we're lucky to have Jen. Like she's got all of the applied side down. She does all the assessments. What assessments are you fluent in, Jen?
VB-MAP, AFOS, Peak. I don't use Peak that much, but I can, all the AFOS has like all different levels. AFOS, AFLES.
Yeah, they have an
also
AFOS.
ABLES. Yeah,
Yeah.
also ABLES. AFOS I use for like in-home a lot when I do in-home clients, to see where their skill levels are as far as independence. They also have one for school that I might do. Yeah, I actually wrote 9 FBAs this summer, and I'm in the middle of writing one today. So I have to finish it up tomorrow. So I would say, and now my company's like, you can write all the FBAs. I'm like, no. So,
Yeah.
but
Do you pay me like a BCBA? No. Then you write your own FBA.
yeah, well, I work underneath them. So I mean,
Oh.
it's okay. They help me when I need them.
Erica says, during a transition IEP, I interviewed my student to get an idea of what is meaningful to him when he graduates high school. That's cool. So Erica has experience in actually interviewing the client. That's pretty cool. So I guess you would see that more in like a school setting. Once they leave me from the clinic setting, because my job is to get them ready to go to you. So once you get them, now they can talk and you can interview them. So that's so nice. Okay. What about a direct assessment? What does a direct assessment look like? That's where we really shine in all our skills. And like Jen said, her actually going in there and conducting the VB map, the ABLs, the AFLs, the peak, whatever assessment is, the client has to actually be in front of you for you to observe that learner's behavior. Okay, so what about standardized tests? Maybe Erica can tell us more about standardized tests since she's more in a school setting.
I actually use those assessment as an indirect method, because if like a VB map is like child language, and it's usually, I always interview the parent, and even the AFLs assessments, I also interview the parent as well, because the kid doesn't know like what their skills are, if they should be folding laundry or not. So I kind of use those as indirect assessments.
The VB map as an indirect assessment?
Yes. I mean, I can observe it, but to get more defined in what I need to make goals, like I have to ask a parent, like, can he tact 5 times? Can he man? How many mans does he have? Can he label things? Can he do this? You can't really ask the client like how many mans they have, right? So especially if they're 4 or 5 and have, 2 words. So yeah.
Well,
Observation, yes, but when you go through the assessment, like it's very particular about how many mans and how many tacks and how many this. So you have to kind of gather those information from the parents.
no, Jen, don't use the VB map as an indirect assessment. You have to sit there in front of them for 2 hours, if possible, and you have to have all your materials, and you have to see if he can man 5 times, and see if he, like, it's like very specific. Like it even gives you a time frame, like, did he man in this amount of time 5 times? If he didn't, then he doesn't meet the criteria. So if you got to score him at a 0 because you didn't observe it, then it is what it is.
Right. Wow.
So
Sometimes
you're talking about
you're
talking about selecting goals for progress, or selecting target goals. So yes, we would use the interviews that we gathered from parents, but you would still score your VB map at 0 if you weren't able to observe any of the behaviors and you probe them.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't always have time to do that. So you got to kind of make some guesses or ask the parent. Like, because when you're assessing in the school, like you can't always tell if the kid does it. So you got to sit, it takes a long time. Like you can infer and say, can he do this or can he do that? And if the parent agrees, then you can not really like assess it like you observed it, but you can infer it. And when you write the summary, I always write like parent, helped with the assessment or whatever. So you got to just be honest. But no, trust me, I've done a BV map and I couldn't do it for too long, for 2 hours, because it isn't like when you have a kid in school, you can't really do that. Like you can't
Yeah.
for 2 hours. So you have to kind of like use your guessing and talk to the parent as well. I don't know.
Wow. That's crazy. So that's how I guess you guys can get an example of how it differs from a clinical setting and a school setting. So like I have a conversation with parents and I take into consideration what they say. But if I'm conducting the VB map, I'm sitting there and only scoring what I observe. And then I'm taking that information and saying they scored 0 on VB map, but dad says that he can command up to 5 sentences. So you'll always want to take into account both, like the direct observation and what mom and dad said, because what mom and dad said isn't always the truth. Or sometimes they like fluff it up and they're like, oh yeah, he can command up to up to 5 words, and then you observe him and he really can't. Anna has a question.
I don't really have a question. I just want to comment about the BB map. The way that I conduct BB map, a school setting and home setting is, I do it and I break it down in different sessions. I don't do like 2 hours in a row because this overwhelms the client, and I just go different days and do the assessment. It takes a while. It's a slow process, my perspective. But the way is I go with the material and I do it with the client directly. Sometimes you can gather information with the parents, but when you go and you do it on your own, other information doesn't match. So if you go and observe yourself and you do it, then you have like a real data, like in what level the child is, and you can provide like a better target behavior on that. But I really don't do it like 2 hours in a row. I do it like, different sessions.
Yeah, I guess it all just depends, and all of these things are to be used as a tool. I guess there's no real like this is the way it needs to be done. So it's really interesting to see all of the different ways that people do it, because I will do a VB map in like a 2 hour, like a sitting. There's actually kits. They sell kits where you can come in with like your whole kit and it has all of the things that you're supposed to do. But really it's like, how am I going to get this kid to tact 50 or 100 things? So Jen is right. Like in a way, sometimes you do have to gather information, or if it's like a reauthorization and it's a client I've been working with for a long time and we've been working on tacting, I know he can tact up to 100 words. So I'm not going to sit there and probe 100 words because it would take forever. So like there's just so many different things that come along with all of these assessments that nobody really talks about, and there's no way you're going to learn it in Cooper or in school. It's just like with trial and error, I feel like.
But also, my experience is when you have one session that's called like, let's say number 5, 6, and 7, maybe onto 20. I don't remember, like, different sessions that have type of the assessment. But for example, if he doesn't score 5, like let's say he doesn't touch 5, but then the number 6 asks you that if the child had, let's say, 10. So if he doesn't touch 5, then that he's not going to touch you 10 or 20 or 15. So he stay on that level right away because he can't tap you like precise item, or or maybe answer to you things. Depend on the level, but like
Yeah.
you don't go further because you know that he can do that one. Also, maybe for mending, you can have like different score and different level, but there are some areas that you just stay there like in travel. If he doesn't do like the two first, so then okay, he can't do the other one because he doesn't have the skill. So you don't go forward. So that's the way that I see it.
Yeah. Okay, so we talk about standardized test, criterion referenced assessment. Measures a child's skill performance across recognized and commonly accepted developmental milestones. So that can be kind of like the VB map, right? Wouldn't that be like a criterion referenced assessment? Curriculum-based assessment. The PEAK has a curriculum base like that is associated with it. So curriculum-based, direct observation. So you're just sitting there and you're taking anecdotal data. Woo-hoo, that's a good ABA word. Who can tell me what anecdotal data is?
ABC?
Yes, yes, ma'am. ABC. You are ABC recording. The observer records a descriptive, temporarily sequenced account of all behaviors of interest and the antecedent conditions and consequences for those behaviors as they occur in the natural. So when I'm doing an FBA, or like I was an intern doing an FBA, so as my direct observation, I was literally just sitting there and taking ABC. Boom. She did this was the behavior, this was the consequence. And then after that, she did this. Like you can narrate somebody's entire life from start to finish and just like sit there and watch them and take ABC. And that's like a really weird, nerdy ABA thing of me to say, but I was just sitting there and like antecedent behavior consequence, like over and over and over and over. And it was just so descriptive because I was like taking those sequence events the way that they were occurring and being as observable and measurable as possible in my direct observations.
Well, it is a good way to study. And then for, my earlier classes, that's what the kind of homework they would give us. They'd say, go to the park and do this for 20 minutes and get me some
Really?
ABC data. Yes.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Yeah, it's good. And it helps you to get into that like behavioral mindset, like, okay, what is really happening here without me saying too much? Less is more in behavior. That's one thing that I've noticed. Like, the less you say, the better.
Parsimony.
Yes, exactly. All right, so ABC
Ask you a
data.
quick question before you move on.
Yeah.
I've got no experience with the VB map. I'm familiar with it through school. Is there a way, like a video or something, that I can learn from that you know of?
There's like a lot of resources for the VB map. They have like their own website and they have like videos and stuff like that. I can look for like some assessment stuff, like dig up some stuff and then post it on our group.
Perfect.
And so that we can kind of like share different experiences.
Something that would be cool is if you could like pull it up, share it during this meeting, share your screen or something so that we can see how it's done rather than, you talking about it.
Okay.
If you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. Let me
Because I have
see.
no idea. Like,
A VB map is like very it's very intense. Like there's many different parts to it.
I don't want to hold up the meeting, so.
It's a whole thing. But let's
Okay.
see. Let me see. Hold on, let me see if this one will play something. You won't be able to like know what's happening unless you have like the actual like data sheets in front of you. So like I've seen this one before. Let me see, let me share. Screen, where is it? Share screen. Do you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, share sound. So I saw this one, I think in college, like they gave us like a this behavior to reference, but like this lady she basically comes in with this suitcase full of stuff, and the VB map has certain milestones or certain targets that are being timed, so you have to observe it within the first 30 minutes. So when you get there, like, did she go and play in the play structure, or like, and it's hard to conduct the VB map for the first time because you don't have them all in your head. I already have most of them in my head, so I can kind of like know what I'm looking for and know what to ask. But it's just all like pretty much trial and error. And so she's just going through and observing this little girl. Oh my gosh, what just happened?
Had on here a paper, Jack and I wrote a paper in receptive. And the speaker skills, again, he's going to break down to man, task, say, how old is a teen that it drives the intervention?
Okay,
Assessment is
that's
so
not it.
critical about the role of assessment.
I don't know what happened.
I probably skip. Oh, I saw it. If you go back up, scroll up
Is that
and hit, scroll back up, go to your
That's-
right hand
that's
screen.
That's Dr. Sundberg. That's the guy that wrote the VB map.
Yeah. But if you go up, all the way up.
Oh, to the lady. Oh yeah. So this is just like her conducting it. She goes in and like starts asking questions, like can she manipulate items? Like it has all of these different questions, and you just kind of go through with using as much stuff as you can, and like following them around and taking data on what you observe. Like, is she able to orient towards you when you call her name? Can she manipulate items, or can she sit with you and read a book for a certain amount of time? Like all of those type of questions is what the VB map will have.
Okay. All right. Now I have an idea of what it's like now. It's okay. I'll go do some research after we get off.
Yeah, definitely. I'll post some stuff on the page, that way you guys can have. But we have a couple more minutes, so we can go on to ecological assessment. So who can tell me what an ecological assessment is?
It's the expensive one in your time and your money. It's very descriptive. That's how I remember it.
Assessing the environment, basically.
Assessing the environment. And why do you say it's really expensive, Amber? Tell me more about your experience.
It's just costly in your time and money because you have to be really descriptive in everything. You're looking at where the person lives, where they work, what they're doing, who they're interacting with, everything about their environment. There's just a lot going on.
Okay. Physiological conditions, physical aspects of the environment, lighting, seating arrangement, noise level, interaction with others, home environment, past reinforcement history. So you're like really collecting data on everything that happens around them. Okay. Oh, now it goes into talking about reactivity. That's my favorite. Who can talk about reactivity?
It's when you act a certain way when you know someone's watching you.
Yeah, exactly. So like in an assessment, they might act a certain way because they know that they're being observed. But you can also think about it the same way as when you're actually sitting in there and supervising your RBTs. They also have reactive effects. Your presence has a reactive effect. So like, I know that I'm being watched, so I'm gonna do my job at 100%. Whereas like, maybe she doesn't act like that all the time. So I always think it's really important to like observe cameras or to always remind them like, hey, you can always be being watched. So just act like you're the way that you would act when I'm here at all times. And I feel like that goes a long way. And that will also help you guys to understand reactivity. It's basically how people react when they're being watched, and its effects on your data. It's going to be different. Okay, I'm going to pause the recording.